This is the last of the 10 Commandments. I know you're all devastated, but God should have written more. So we're going to be doing 11, 12, and 13 in the series, and I'm going to be adding some to the list. I'll just rotate this around a little bit so you can see it. As you can see, it's a blank page. It's quite interesting. What is the last commandment? Anybody remember? Covet, yes. Everybody loves that one. Do you know, it's probably the least understood of all the commandments. If you were to kind of think about your list of the 10 commandments and which ones really speak to you, and you think, yes, totally agree with that, and which ones you're not quite sure how they apply, covet may well come kind of top of your list with the not quite sure how it applies, and murder and adultery are probably top of your list for, yes, definitely agree with those. And so this is a kind of an interesting one. But really, it's one of the few commandments that deals with the thoughts and intentions of the heart, more so than an outward working of what's going on in our lives. And so it's dealing with wants and desires. And so if you were to ask a kind of a cliche Christian audience, and we seem to be one, what covet is, then most Christians that I've kind of asked this question to would say it's about focusing on your wants and not your needs. Would you kind of go along with something similar to that? Would that be the kind of way you distinguish? So needs would be, you know, brush your teeth and eat food and breathe. And wants would be, you know, the Ferrari and everything else. And so, you know, don't have wants and just have needs. But I want to be a good father. I don't need to be. Jack needs me to be, Naomi needs me to be, my kids, but I don't need to be a good father, I want to be one. Is that coveting? I have a desire to live in a good nation. It's not a need. Does it mean that desires are wrong and I shouldn't covet a good, healthy nation? And so what actually does this word covet mean? You see, if it was to mean removal of all wants and desires, then I'm afraid you'd be a Buddhist and not a Christian. There is nothing in the Bible that says you are not allowed to have a desire. In fact, the Bible often tells us that God gives us the thoughts and desires of our hearts. Not all of them, but certainly many of them. And so many wants and desires are actually justified. God in the Bible is often described as being a jealous God, as coveting us. And so you have to read the Bible a little bit carefully. In Exodus 20, verse 17, it says, you shall not covet your neighbor's ... I have a neighbor with a very nice garden. And it's not that I covet a nice garden, because to be honest, I'm not very good at gardening, and neither is Sonia, so the pair of us don't have a nice garden. But if I was to covet my neighbor's garden, it'd be quite kind of hard to get hold of it. Can't exactly lift up to the garden and put it in mine. So there's certain things that would be difficult to covet, and there are other things that would be easy to covet, and they could be quite destructive. You know, say, for example, I was coveting my neighbor's wife. She's a little old for me, but coveting my neighbor's wife might be rather interesting. But obviously the Bible is talking about not just the person that lives next door, it's talking about everybody. Yeah? And so we are kind of reading here something about wants and desires associated with what belongs to somebody else. Now we're getting onto territory we can kind of work with. So, have you ever watched somebody drive a really nice car and thought, I'd like one? Yeah? Unfortunately, it's none of you. No, I'm joking. I quite like the car I have, so I'm satisfied with that. But there have been times when I've watched a car drive by and thought, oof, Aston Martin Vantage. You know, that really is kind of probably the one at the moment that I would go, ooh, I could really covet that. And if I was to, therefore, work on that, that may lead to theft or all sorts of things. And so what we're dealing with here is thoughts and intentions, which can lead to bad consequences. And if you read most of the literature about thou shalt not covet, the majority of it, the vast majority of it, talk about how covet leads to the other sins. And so covet in and of itself is a kind of an intention predisposition to sin beyond it. So the coveting of the neighbour's wife leads to adultery. The coveting of the neighbour's house leads to killing the neighbour so you can take the property. The coveting of a neighbour's watch is leading to potential theft of the watch. Naomi and Jack collect these little sticker things called Force Attacks, which is kind of like Star Wars figures, but on cards. There's nothing kind of special about them. It's just the person, and they like the Star Wars, and so they like them. And there's this character called Ahsoka, who is a Twi'lek, lightsaber-wielding Jedi. And Naomi likes Ahsoka because it's a girl, it's young, and she's a powerful girl. And so she likes that. And Jack had it, and she didn't. And so one day, it disappeared. And where is it? She's 4, bless her little heart. I haven't got it, so you trust him. Okay, Naomi, I'm going to trust you and I'm going to believe you, but if we find out you have taken it, then we're going to be a little disappointed and we're going to have a little conversation and everything else. Anyway, we took her to school because she started school, and I picked her jumper out of her bag to put it on her, and out came Ahsoka. Coveting had led to theft. And it was a little tiny example of, bless her little heart, of what happens. And obviously, when you read the books and things, it'll tell you that that's exactly how it works. But really, there's something deeper going on with covet, and I'd like to cover some of that. I'd like to cover some of that this evening. And it's not always the kind of stuff you'll read in the literature, but I think it certainly applies. Have you ever wished you were somebody else? Some people do. Have you ever kind of looked at somebody's life and thought, I wish I could be like that. I wish I could have that life. I wish I could have what they have. I wish I could be in the house they were in. I wish I could have the car they have. It's the same kind of thing going on with covet, but it's something deeper going on. It's the sense of, I do not want what I have, I want what they have. I do not want the life I lead, I want the life they lead. I do not want the job I have, I want the job they have. I do not want the wife I have, I want the wife they have. And there's this sense of a desire to live another life. We see it propagated throughout our culture when we talk about celebrity worship and everything else. We see it in our culture when some of these people play these computer games where they live another life. And there have been stories of people that have almost died, or even have died, because they have been so involved in this other life that they do not live their own. Okay? There is actually a game out there called Second Life, and people make money on it. Real money out of fake money. It causes a right headache for accountants. And so this living another life, and this idea of living another life. Now actually, we do this sometimes when we try and paint a picture of ourselves that isn't ourselves. Try and paint a false reality. We try and big our lives up and make it more glamorous or more fashionable to other people so they will find us more acceptable, because if they really knew the true person inside, they would not like this person, and so I will try and be somebody else or someone else in order to do that. I am coveting an idea of something I am not, and I am trying to become like that by stealing from its identity. And so there is these processes going on in our intentions and our thoughts which have desires to have another blessing, somebody else's life, somebody else's product, somebody else's property, somebody else's wife, somebody else's identity.